Some high-stakes diplomacy already in motion ahead of the key G20 summit, which kicks off tomorrow in Bali. Leaders of the world's two biggest superpowers have been meeting face-to-face for the past few hours. Both Chinese President Xi Jinping and his US counterpart Joe Biden have stressed the need to manage their differences and avoid conflict between their nations.
As leaders of the two major countries, we need to chart the right course for the China-US relationship. We need to find the right direction for the bilateral relationship going forward and elevate the relationship. A statesman should think about and know where to lead his country. He should also think about and know how to get along with other countries and the wider world.
As the leaders of our two nations, we share responsibility, in my view, to show that China and the United States can manage our differences, prevent competition from becoming anything ever near conflict, and to find ways to work together on urgent global issues that require our mutual cooperation. And I believe this is critical for the sake of our two countries and the international community.
The leaders were all smiles when seen sharing a warm handshake ahead of their discussions. Mr. Biden expressed his pleasure to see the Chinese leader, saying there is no substitute for face-to-face talks. It's a sentiment which Mr. Xi also echoed. He added that a candid conversation between the two is in order and that both nations should take history as a mirror to let it guide the future. And our team is standing by to bring you the latest from the Chinese and US perspectives, plus an overview from the Indonesian hosts of the G20 meetings. For more, we're joined now by Olivia Xiong. She's live for us over in Bali. Olivia, good evening. The world is watching as these two leaders meet for the first time in person, at least since the pandemic. Do we know yet if there have been any outcomes from these talks?
Well, Dawn, these talks between Mr. Xi and Mr. Biden, long awaited and began at around 5:30 p.m. local time in that hall that you see lit up right behind me. Those talks now taking place behind closed doors. And it's been more than 2.5 hours now. And we are waiting to hear more on what progress has been made, what exactly has been said as these two leaders have finally sat down face to face in this meeting that's being closely watched around the world. Many media from around the world still staking out this venue over here. But let it be known that there is going to be no joint statement being released by these two countries, but we are likely going to see separate statements. Mr. Biden expected to speak to reporters after the meeting ends here in Bali, and we'll be looking out for that. And one of the things that we'll be looking out for is just how long these talks would have gone on for, given the range of issues that need to be discussed, as we have seen tensions between the two countries soar in recent years. And the media was let in for the opening remarks of this meeting, and both leaders acknowledged that there are sticking points that need to be worked out. Mr. Xi, on his part, saying that he looks forward to a, quote, candid and in-depth exchange of views on US and China, and we will be looking to see how that goes. No specific mention on what exactly he will be raising, but we know that the two countries face tensions over a whole range of issues, from trade to technology and the self-ruled island of Taiwan. And however, analysts are saying that even though this is a high-stakes meeting, expectations are low for there to be any sort of tangible outcome or resolution to the key issues that these two countries face. But nonetheless, they say it's a step in the right direction and hopefully will help in easing tensions that we've seen.
There certainly are plenty of issues to iron out between these two superpowers. But Olivia, President Xi said that the two sides, they need to find the right direction for relations. What can we read into what he may have meant?
Well, key in Mr. Xi's remarks talking about the right direction, he pointed out that he felt that the current bilateral relationship was not right. In fact, he said it was not in the fundamental interest of both countries, and that. But here we know that the issue is the definition of right means different things to China and to the U.S. As we've seen in the last few years. Take the issue of the self-ruled island of Taiwan, for example. Beijing being clearly angered when U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi made a controversial visit to the self-ruled island, and then we saw Beijing launch those unprecedented military drills and cut off a dialogue with military talks and as well as over climate change. But then the U.S. is saying that it's acting because it is concerned about Beijing being more assertive, and is concerned as well that it has sped up its timeline for reunification and to bring Taiwan under its control as well. More broadly as well, China views the U.S. as trying to rally its allies to clamp down on its rise. And so we see that both countries really seem to be quite far apart when it comes to key issues. But what was also interesting from Mr. Xi's statement is the mention that this is personal. And he said that Mr. Biden and him need to play a leadership role. And as statesmen of major nations, they should think about and know where to lead the country, and to think about and know how to get along with other countries and the wider world. We know that this is significant because for Mr. Xi, this is his first overseas trip he's making since a twice-a-decade party congress last month, where he consolidated power and began a landmark third term at the helm.
Olivia, thank you for that. Olivia Seong there reporting to us live from Bali.
Well, let's cross now to Washington, D.C. Simon Marks is standing by. Simon, the leaders we saw exchanged pleasantries, at least in front of the media. From your perspective, are you hearing anything more on how the talks really went?
Well, no detail about what's taken place yet behind closed doors, but I think it is evident about what President Biden is trying to achieve in this conversation with President Xi Jinping. Senior administration officials have made it clear over the last few days that the goal for President Biden is to use his personal relationship with President Xi Jinping to show that there is no substitute for face-to-face leader-level conversation, that isn't just, as President Biden often likes to say, hyperbole, but it can be translated into concrete achievement. And what that concrete achievement would be is the creation, according to senior administration officials, of some kind of floor that would support ongoing discussions between US and Chinese officials, including, of course, discussions between himself and President Xi Jinping. Both men went into this meeting in a stronger position than they were just a few weeks ago. President Xi, of course, because of the outcome of the party congress in Beijing, but President Biden, perhaps to his own surprise, stronger as a result of having learnt just over the weekend that his Democratic Party is going to continue enjoying a majority in the United States Senate. So that gave him a fillip going into this meeting. And as we've heard consistently from the president and others in his inner circle, this is all about finding a way to manage differences and avoid conflict, but to seize on areas where progress is possible. And in his remarks before that bilateral meeting got underway, President Biden immediately seized on the discussions that have been taking place at COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, the climate change summit, and again on the fact that the United States and China, despite all the other difficulties in their bilateral relationship, have managed to talk and make progress on the global warming issue. So the US sees that as a way in which a broader, more positive relationship can develop. But clearly, this is going to be very difficult. And I think no one here is arguing that just one meeting is going suddenly to resolve all the problems that exist.
Do you think that they will stick to broad strokes? The White House did, however, say that the president would bring up specific issues like Taiwan and North Korea.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that these talks will get granular. I mean, they always have in the previous virtual interactions between President Biden and Xi Jinping, and that is built on the fact that these men know and understand one another. President Biden was speaking again over the weekend about the more than 80 hours that he and President Xi Jinping have historically spent together, many of those even before either of them were presidents of their own countries. So he has a firm belief that he can speak his mind to President Xi. And as we heard from President Xi, the Chinese believe that that works both ways as well. I think that the US administration will have noticed one remark that President Xi made in those opening comments. A statesman, he said, should think about and know how to get along with other countries and the wider world. Now, on the face of it, that is, one can't really contradict that. But that, I think, the US will take as a remark that is suggesting China understands how to get along with the wider world, but it's the United States that the Chinese believe is falling up short in that regard, particularly when it comes to issues like Taiwan and the hardening of positions that we've witnessed, particularly up on Capitol Hill, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's controversial visit to Taipei, for example. So Taiwan, Ukraine, human rights, a panoply of issues where there are difficulties in the relationship and where both men indicated in those opening comments that they are very much coming at that from opposite directions.
Simon, as always, thank you so much for the report there. Simon Marks reporting live from Washington.
Well, let's now go to Chani Bhavani. She's also in Bali. Good evening, Chani. President Widodo, he's already had several bilateral meetings with leaders ahead of the G20 summit that kicks off tomorrow. Any major outcomes from those talks?
Well, to recap what is certainly a very busy day for President Joko Widodo, according to his agenda, the Indonesian president has had at least 6 bilateral meetings so far ahead of tomorrow's G20 summit, and a couple of more bilateral meetings are scheduled on his agenda tonight. He's had meetings so far with the US, Japan, the European Commission, Turkey, Australia, and Canada, and a common theme that seems to be running through all his bilaterals is the goal of strengthening ties and cooperation with all of these parties. Now, to highlight some of them, and based on official statements from the Presidential Secretariat, we have President Widodo expressing Indonesia's commitment to providing full support and participation to the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, for example. According to a White House release, the IPEF will enable the U.S. and its allies in ensuring that American workers, small businesses, and ranchers can compete in the Indo-Pacific. We have Indonesia's president encouraging Indonesia and Turkey to continue negotiating a comprehensive economic partnership agreement, which includes major trade agreements to be finalized soon. And while we are waiting for official statements on the other bilateral meetings, another common theme seems to be ASEAN, with President Widodo expressing hope that the U.S. can participate in the ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific concept of framework, and encouraging the concrete implementation and synergizing of the ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific with Japan's vision of the free and open Indo-Pacific as well.
Chani, there have also been reports that Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, that he's in hospital in Bali, but the Kremlin has denied that. Have you been able to verify if he is indeed hospitalized and if he's doing okay?
Well, that one was certainly a situation that no one saw coming. Associated Press, citing Indonesian officials, said that Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov had been taken to hospital after arriving in Bali for the summit. Now, AP reportedly went on to say that he had been treated for a heart condition. We then saw a report from Reuters citing Minister Lavrov dismissing these reports. And let's take a look here at Minister Lavrov himself, dressed very much in theme with Bali's resort vibe, in shorts and a t-shirt, once again dismissing those reports himself. Take a listen.
Ну, и про нашего президента уже лет 10 пишут, что он заболел. Это такая, в общем-то, игра, которая не новая в политике.
We know that Minister Lavrov is here on behalf of Russian President Putin. He is representing President Putin at the G20 talks. The subject of Ukraine certainly expected to dominate this meeting, and at this point it remains unclear if leaders will be able to agree, as we did see US and Russia at odds there at the ASEAN summit just over the weekend. And Foreign Minister Lavrov, however, has said that he is preparing for tomorrow's summit, and he has said that there will be several speeches tomorrow and that Russia will accept the final declaration of the leaders.
Chandni, thank you very much for that. Chandni Bhavani there speaking to us from Bali.
Flurry of diplomatic activity taking place in Bali this week as leaders gather for the G20 summit. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is expected to hold talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping tomorrow. It will be the first meeting between leaders of both countries after years of soured relations. A Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida is set to meet with the Chinese leader on Thursday on the sidelines of the APEC gathering in Bangkok. Ahead of the G20 summit, Mr. Kishida has held talks with both G20 chair Joko Widodo.